going on, YouTube? Bill, Pure Cajun Outdoors. Out here today, we ain't doing no fishing, okay? This is the deal. I know a lot of people in some of my past videos, especially for catfishing, have been asking, hey man, what kind of rigs do you use for catfishing? What's the best kind? Truth is, there's a ton of videos on the internet, on YouTube about this already. Obviously, if y'all asking me still though, y'all haven't seen them, and it doesn't make any sense for me to sit there and send y'all to someone else's page when I can tell y'all myself. So this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go over probably 3 different rigs that I personally use on a regular basis. The type of rig I use depends basically on where I'm fishing and the conditions of where I'm fishing at. They're all real similar rigs now. Basically all the same principle. I don't even know the technical names for some of these rigs, that Santee, Cooper, and Carolina, and Kentucky rig. And I know there's a ton of different names for these rigs, and I'm gonna just show y'all what I use, how I use it, and how I rig it up. And hopefully this can sit here and help y'all out in the future, land some big fish, land fish period. Because these rigs is not trophy size catfishing. I use them whether or not I'm going after eater size fish or not. This is just some good overall, all around rigs for any type of fishing that I do, especially catfishing. Now I really use these same rigs for gar fishing, for sharks, with some slight modifications. Today we're focusing just on catfishing rigs. Stay tuned. All right, so this is going to be one of the first rigs we're going to go over today. Carolina rig, Santee, Cooper rig, modified rig of each one. Not really sure what you want to call it, but this is basically what we got. I come from my main line, which I use 85-pound braid. I come down to a 3-way swivel. I like these type of 3-way swivels a lot better than the one that has like the circle in the middle with the 3 swivels coming off of each side. I just like these better. I have a duo snap clip. I use that for my sinkers. Regardless of what type of sinker you use, those come in real handy. Then I have my leader line coming down. I have a cork on it, 4-inch peg float. The peg float size depends on the size bait that you're trying to float up off the bottom. The length of your leader will decide on how far you're trying to float up off the bottom. From my peg float, I come down. I have one of these Rattlers with 3 beads. Now you might wonder why I have 3 beads below my Rattler, and the reason being is, like my Rattler sitting right on top of my hook, it may not make that much of a difference, but I just try to get it up off that hook some, let it float a little bit better, and a free spin. Then I come down to a snailed hybrid circle hook. I tend not to like to use regular circle hooks. Call me old-fashioned, call me whatever you want. I like to still set a hook sometimes, you know. It's good when they self-set, when I have them in the rod holders and all of that works out fine. I like that. But I like a hybrid style circle, something that still gives me the option to set it, and I don't have to worry about losing that fish every time if I kind of lose track of myself and I go to set that hook on my own. I still have a real high hookup rate, so that's why I like that. Some of y'all may have noticed that I don't have a knot that comes off my top 3-way swivel to my leader line. I use crimps. You don't have to use crimps. I use crimps because it speeds up the process a lot better for me, especially in the boat. If I can just crimp those leaders together, especially when you start to deal with, I use 100-pound leader material. Different companies have it. Regardless of what company you go to and regardless of what they say, tying good knots on them is can be somewhat difficult. It's just some thick line, and it's somewhat stiff and slick, and they do tie, and there's occasions where I will just tie them. Just is a lot quicker, and I trust them a lot more with a crimp on them. You can pick these crimp ups at most bait and tackle shops, and it doesn't really matter. They don't cost a whole lot for what they do and for the convenience of them. I've never lost a big fish, or any fish for that matter, to a crimp giving out. If some of y'all are worried about that, I've never lost a big fish to them. Knock on wood, never say never. I haven't up to this point though. As far as the knots that I use, and what I basically tell anyone, the best knot is whatever knot you feel the most comfortable with and that you're confident that you can tie the best. All of these knots, they do have some pros and cons in them, But in the end, if you can halfway tie this type of knot good, it's gonna fail on you much quicker than a not as good knot, in a sense to say, that you can tie very well. So best knot is the knot you can tie the best and that you have the most confidence in when you put it on, because that's the whole ticket, having confidence in your knot. So that's really the main thing that I try to do when I'm making these rigs. Y'all might look at this rig, and I have a pretty long leader line on this one because of where I was fishing. I was trying to get this bait up off the bottom a little further, so I have a long one. Typically I try to make my leaders about 18 inches. This one's about 24 inches right here, so it's a little bit longer than I would normally use in certain places, like in a lake or something. But in certain riverbeds and certain places, I like to give it a little bit higher up the water column, so this right here works out better. Once again, main line to a 3-way swivel and duo snap clip, crimped down to my leader, 4-inch peg float, Versa Rattler. I like these rattles. I can't say that I've noticed a huge difference when using them, but there is certain times, especially if I'm using live bait or there's a lot of current, I like the fact that those rattles up on there give just it's another tool, you know. Nothing is guaranteed 100% to work regardless of what these manufacturers try to sell you on. You got to look at it as just a tool. You still have to do other things to make sure you get the job done, but it's just another tool to help out, to give you an edge, to add something else to that bait, to that line, to hopefully attract something. And that rattle that's in there, the idea of it is it gives the sound of fish feeding. It attracts other fish. Hopefully that's the goal of it. I have had some days where the line with a rattle on it definitely out-caught lines that didn't have rattles on it. This right here is a good live bait or cut bait line. All right, so this next setup we're going to show you, this rig right here, I like to use this rig for if I notice the fish are hugging the bottom a lot more. Sometimes these fish will hug the bottom depending on the weather conditions, depending on a lot of things. They'll hug that bottom more than normal. I like this setup right here. I notice it does better, like I said, when they hug in the bottom and you have some good clean bottoms, whether it's sandy or not, mud. Basically same thing. I have main line, 3-way swivel duo snap. As you can see, I tied this leader line on here, about an 18-inch leader, just down to a snailed hook. You'll notice I don't have the float, don't have the rattle. Carolina rig, basically, you know, I guess is what you would call this. Like I said, due to the fact that there's no peg float on it, I have a fixed sinker as opposed to a sliding sinker. It'll hold this rig on the bottom a lot better, especially if you have lower current to a medium current. This right here will really help keep that bait on the bottom. And there is times when that's gonna be what you want. You know, floating them up just won't get it done. And you'll be able to tell, especially if you bank fishing, you may not know this, but if you marking fish on a fish finder or tell, they're up on the bottom, some 2-3 foot off the bottom. Tell those things, and that typically kind of gives you an idea of what their feeding pattern is going to be for, if not that day, at least for that moment. Sometimes, a lot of times when the fish, I find, when they higher up, they're traveling a good bit, they're more likely to move around, and so you would want to bait higher. But sometimes these fish aren't traveling. They kind of just get on the bottom, hunker down, and that's kind of where they at. And regardless of what people say, sometimes these fish are just kind of lazy. They don't want to swim up, grab a bait, check a bait out, none of those things. So your best bet is to present it right on the bottom, right in front of them, or at least right where they're at, traveling around. Where they don't have to work much far. They kind of just swim up to it, suck it up, and hopefully you'll get you a good hook set. So that's what I like to use that rig for. We'll go ahead and jump into this third rig that I like to use. Is the final rig. It's a newer one that I'm trying out. I've had some luck on it so far. Haven't done a lot of catfishing with this rig yet, just due to the weather, the time of year, the heat of the summer. Y'all already know catfishing is a little bit more difficult at this time of the year. So let's jump into this third rig. All right, this last rig I'm going to show y'all, I mainly use this rig exclusively for cut bait. It's a newer rig I've used. I have caught fish on it. I just haven't used it enough to see if it outcatches other type of rigs that I use. We got our main line, once again, coming down to a regular swivel. barrel swivel that's on there. Once again, I have it crimped. I have a rubber bead stop, and I have another swivel with a duo snap on it. And I use this for a sinker slide. I know there's a ton of sinker slides on the market from various different companies. Some take them on and off without having to cut your line. Some stay on your line. I like to switch it up. This one right here obviously is on a swivel, so I would have to cut my line to get it off. With other brands that I've used that I'm able to take on and off the line, I use heavy weights. I fish in the river most of the time, so there's always a lot of current. 6, 8, 10 ounce weights is typically what I'm throwing, and heavy baits on top of that. In my experience with some of the sinker slides that you can take off, the dogs that hold it on, they're not really that strong. And if for whatever reason you have a malfunction while you casting and your bell closes on you, or you forget to open it up, whatever, it's happened to all of us. When you go to cast it, if it locks up for whatever reason, those dogs with that type of weight will just break off the sinker and the slide flying, and you won't retrieve it. I've also seen where moderate to light snags, where I get my hook and stuff back, the sinker slide will break. So for the price of them, to be able to take them on and off, it just wasn't worth it. So I just went to using swivels as a sinker slide. And let me tell you, I've had no issue with them. They don't mess the line up any. They're smooth, they're round. Maybe over time they might put a lot of hours on one rig. I'm typically cutting line and re-checking my line for abrasion and re-rigging as I see fit. Okay, so I haven't had an issue with them popping line at all. And that's not something that I use unique to this. Anytime I've ever used sinker slides, I use those swivels. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You can see, once again, back to the sinker slide, use a rubber stop, people. They have the plastic beads on the market and things, but I find if you're gonna use a plastic bead stop, the purpose of these is try to protect your knots. That's really what it is, so you can stop that sinker slide from slamming into that knot with the weight. If you use a plastic bead, you're almost defeating the purpose of it, because them plastic beads are just as hard, and they'll mess up them knots too and nick them up and weaken them up. So from the main line swivel, I come to a leader, and what y'all have different here, I have a ball chain swivel inside this leader. In my experience, what I've noticed that ball swivel allows me to do is it gives that line more action in the current. Once again, this is why I like to use this when using cut bait. Live bait, you really don't need that too much. You can still use it. There's no downside to it. But cut bait is already, especially depending on what type of fish you're targeting, it's not lively for sure. So you, depending on whatever current you have, you're depending on smells, a lot of things you're depending on with cut bait to work for you. With that ball chain swivel, what it does, it gives that leader just a little bit more action in the water. Anytime you can create more action, that's a plus. That's an attractant for fish. So that's why I use it. It's a ball chain swivel, still strong, crimp both sides of it. You typically want to put it 6 to 8 inches above your hook. That way just your hook whips. You don't want the whole leader whipping around in the water. You basically want where your hook's gonna be. So you put it 6 to 8 inches above your hook. That's where I'll run them at. And I've done good with them. And then once again, we'll go from the ball swivel down to a 4-inch peg float. No rattlers or anything on this setup. Just snailed to a hybrid circle hook. This ball swivel, once again, it's a little bit more than 6 to 8 inches. You know, I don't always measure them with a tape measure, but right above the hook, and it gives you more action. This is a good cut bait thing. You could also fish this same rig up with a fixed sinker slide. I just had a sinker slide on this one, and that's how I like to run them. That's my 3 go-to rigs. To show you how the knots I tie and snail knots. Everyone, I'm almost certain at this point in time, if you're watching this, you've seen a million videos on tying snail knots. There's multiple different ways. Whichever one you find works best for you, that's the one I say go with. If you've never had an issue with the hooks coming undone, snails coming undone, whatever, stick with it. If you've caught fish with it, stick with it. That's what I always tell people. It goes back to the old mantra. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. I guarantee you one thing. The type of knot you tie doesn't attract the fish. Now, it's important that certain knots will allow you to hook up different, but when it comes to a snail knot, it's either gonna work or it's not. And if it's working, there's no need to change it. So that's what I wanted to do today. Keep it a short video. Show y'all the 3 different rigs I use, because I've had a lot of questions about it. And instead of answering each person individually, I figured I'd just go on ahead and make a video about it. I hope y'all use them. If y'all use them, let me know in the comments, man. Tell me what rigs y'all use in the comments down below. Let me know what y'all have had success with, what y'all haven't had success with. Hope y'all good luck with them if y'all do try to use them and y'all catch some fish with them. Let me know. Get on Instagram, Pure Cajun Outdoors. Send me some pictures. Facebook, Pure Cajun Outdoors, same thing. If y'all use these rigs and y'all catch fish with them, send me a picture, send me a short video, whatever. Let me know, hey man, it worked. And I might feature y'all, put y'all post up on the channel. I hope y'all find these useful. Any other questions, whatever comments, leave them down below. Y'all know I try to answer. Pure Cajun Outdoors. Give it a thumbs up. Share, subscribe. It's important. That's the best thing you can do to help us out. And until the next one, which hopefully will be soon, y'all stay safe.